There we go. Now we're recording. Hello, Paul Klaas. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Bill. Good to see you, man.
You also, my friend. What we're going to be talking about today is while we go through this, right now it's a pandemic, but it's going to be hard times that we as real estate investors go through on a regular basis. And why it's important not to quit. And it's easy to quit. It's easy to throw your hands up. Too hard, too tough. Rehab's too much. I can't find a house. They wouldn't sell it to me. So and so took the deal from me. My competitors are too tough. I don't like sitting here and doing these letters. I don't like mowing the grass. That property's too. You get the idea. There's a million reasons to quit, and
Right.
there's not that many reasons to keep going. But I promise you, the reasons to keep going are more important. So I wanted to talk to Paul because if somebody understands not quitting, the value of not quitting, how to not to quit, it is going to be Paul. So, Paul, introduce yourself to everybody.
Well, my name is Paul Klaas. Currently stationed in Annapolis, Maryland. Been in the military for 17 years. Been in the SEAL teams for 17 years, and just getting ready to retire here in a number of years. Started real estate investing a few years ago in preparation for retirement.
And
Uh,
you're a Master Chief,
I'm a senior chief.
senior chief. I'm sorry about that. I go back to I'm an Army brat, but anyway. So you're a senior chief in the Navy, and not very many people reach that rank. So congratulations, my friend.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's been a great career, and definitely a lot of lessons learned from my career that I can apply to real estate. And so I'm enjoying that process, especially right
Okay.
now.
So when we're talking to you, kind of talk about what you're doing right now. You said you're at Annapolis. What are you doing right now? What's your station?
So I work at the Naval Academy. Kind of helping run selection here at the Naval Academy for the midshipmen, and do a little bit of teaching. A little bit of wrestling and boxing, and work with the Navy lacrosse team. So I've got a number of jobs, and I'm just, kind of taking a knee and getting to visit with my family, get to know my kids, and just really enjoying some downtime. So, I can't say I've taken full advantage of the downtime because I've kind of picked up more on the real estate end and just tried to, while I'm still active duty, still just trying to get this real estate thing revved up so that when I retire, I can hit it full steam.
So why real estate? Why are you trying to rev up real estate before you retire?
So um, I think that real estate has a lot of similarities to the military, but specifically the special operations. And I felt that when I was as active duty, the only other thing that I could really do to kind of generate wealth for my family was real estate. So I got fascinated with it, and started realizing, wow, this is actually making a big difference in my life. I would love to kind of help other military personnel and special operations guys. I would love to help them out. As I kind of get better at this, I would love to help them out too. So I just looked
Why?
at it. What's
Why?
that?
Why?
Um, I think that I talk to a lot of guys, and as if you spend your like I when I graduated from high school, I immediately went into the military, and so I've been doing this my entire adult life. And a lot of times I speak to a lot of guys, and they don't really know what they're going to do next. So I didn't want to be like that. So probably 4 or 5 years ago, I started looking into what am I going to do? I can't. They're not going to let me be a SEAL forever. So what am I going to do next that is going to keep me excited? That's going to be challenging. That's going to be different every day. That's going to help me take care of my family. And I kind of looked at all different aspects. It wasn't like one specific thing, but my big motivation is to help military guys. When they retire from the military, I would love for them to just hit the ground running with something else and not even really need to work when they retire. You spend 20 years away from your family. And then, I would just think it would be great to teach guys how to, from the very beginning, learn how to invest so that when they retire after 20 years, they're done. And now it's time to spend time with your family, and they're not retiring with no plan.
So you've been in for 16 years and you've seen people who get out. What happens, again, because being in the military is a certain lifestyle, certain way, certain language, certain everything. It's very different from being a civilian. So when you've had some of your buddies get out, what are some of the problems that they face if they haven't made any plans ahead of time?
Obviously, financial distress. I think that there's a lot of things that you get in the SEAL teams that you kind of don't appreciate while you're active duty. And it has nothing to do with finances. It's just, you're around a bunch of like-minded individuals, and it's kind of like your own little ecosystem, and you have these motivations, you have these drives to be a good guy, in your platoon. And it kind of, the motivation is just there because I don't want to let Bill down, I don't want to let Dave down. And when you deploy, I think that you're fighting for the country, right? And that helps you rationalize what you're doing. But when you're on the ground, you're not doing it for America. You're doing it for your friend, So a lot of the system that is special operations, a lot of these drivers, a lot of these motivations kind of take care of themselves a little bit. So when you retire and now you're just on your own, the SEAL teams keeps chugging along. All the systems and motivations are still there for those guys that are involved. But when you retire, if I sleep in, I'm not going to be called a turd for sleeping in because I'm not in a platoon anymore. So you kind of get institutionalized a little bit in the military with the systems that are there, and you kind of that when even here at the Naval Academy, I'm not in a platoon anymore. So, you're starting to learn how do I find that drive in something else, and why should it be real estate, or why should it be business? So, to me, that's kind of what I would like to do. Is I'd like to help bridge that gap. So when guys retire, it's like, for me, it's real estate. And so I want to find other people in special operations who real estate is that thing for them. And then we can work together to make progress.
And that's a big why. And I think when we first met, it was 2019, right? Early 2019.
Yeah. Yep.
And again, I immediately took a liking to you because number one is, you serve the country. So that's really important. But the other part is you had a really big why. You weren't just there for you. You were also there looking for, people who had a similar background as yours, being military, that when they come out, it's what do you do next? Again, I watched when my dad came out of the Army. There was a time there where it's like, well, what happens next? What am I supposed to do next? And that can be a little bit of a soul search. And it's, especially when you've been in since you're young, when you don't know another way. And all of a sudden you're out, especially if you're in your 30s or early 40s, and all of a sudden, you've been in since your teens. Yeah. And that's very, very different. And it's easy to get lost.
You're so used to having this
regimen,
this inherent drive to succeed in the military, because everything that you do is graded, everything that you do is assessed, and so the systems are there that to get through buds and all that, to get through training, that's challenging because there's not a lot of but you're still with a boat crew of guys that you don't want to let down. That was my biggest concern, was not looking like a sissy in front of the guys around me. So you'll do a lot of things when people are watching you. And so there's a lot of motivational incentives in special operations, and they kind of take care of themselves. So I think what happens a lot of times is guys, when they retire, now all those things are stripped away literally overnight. And you can go through I think guys go through a lot of depression, and they're trying to find, how do I, because I can be tired, I can be miserable, I know how to suffer, I have all these traits, all these qualities, but when you remove a lot of these social aspects, it becomes really, really challenging to kind of find yourself and your next why, and your the next system that's going to help you progress to be a better person. So
Okay, as we're moving forward, also, you're going to have some guys who are watching this, some people, men and women, and they may want to call you. Will you give out your phone number? Can you?
absolutely, yeah. It's 619-536-6329.
And
That's
it's Paul
myself.
Klaas, Klaas.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Call, text, anything,
Yeah.
anytime.
And my name is Bill Cook. So if you have a question about real estate investing or deal structuring, feel free to give me a call. Phone number 770-815-8727. Don't text me. Don't email me. Just call me. Don't text me to see if you can call me. Just call me.
See, I'm the opposite. Text me first so that I know who you are, and then we'll go from there.
Well, evidently you have a lot more going on in your life than I do. So
I'm a millennial too.
yeah, yeah.
So
Okay, so let's get into talk about quitting and then not quitting and how that's a decision. So when we talked, one of the things you said was quitting was a process. Is not a one moment thing. Can you talk about that?
yeah. So the old saying, the battle's lost before the first shot is fired.
Yep.
Before any shots are fired. I think that's kind of the way quitting goes. It's not a one-time thing. It's not the decision that you made in that moment. Sure, that was, you quit, but there was lots of things leading up to that made you make that decision. So, I like to say that your character is what you do when you're not thinking. And a lot of times that's what people do. They get to that moment where they're so overwhelmed by stress or by events that they just turn off and quit. But so they'll only analyze, the 10-second time span where they went from being fine to when they quit. They're only looking right there, but the real problem was all the other things that they were doing in their life.
So if someone's out, let's say they're out, they just got done talking to a seller. They presented an offer and the seller said no and said, I can't believe you made a lowball offer like that, because the investor didn't know how to deal structure it all. So all they knew how to do was make the 60 cent on the dollar offer. And so they yelled at, and then, when they get back to their car, they're like, I'm done with this. I want to quit.
Yeah.
So you're saying that it didn't just happen at that kitchen table. They had been thinking about this building up to that moment in time.
Yeah, and not necessarily even thinking about it, because I think that people, it's not that they were thinking about quitting, it's just they weren't mentally prepared for what they were going to do when they wanted to quit. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
In the military, I think a lot of times, I've talked to a lot of guys with a ton of combat experience in the military. And whenever I talk to those guys, especially when I was a younger frogman, they said they always imagined themselves going through kind of the worst case scenario of, having to help out their friend when they're injured, wounded, killed, kind of going through that mentally. Not saying that this is never going to happen, right? You're assuming it's going to happen. So how am I going to deal with that? Imagining yourself dealing with that. So, and you're not wrong. Like, when you're in that situation, it's not that you've done anything wrong. It's just that and so when you get there, if you haven't ever imagined it, then you're not going to be prepared to have the instinctual reaction. So I think that's the biggest thing, is everyone's okay. Like you've been talking about, the last 10 years has just been a big giant real estate boom. Nobody's really thought about, what am I going to do when I go to 20 houses and everybody says no? They haven't imagined themselves sitting in their car, hating life. They haven't imagined, what am I going to do? So I think that's really, really important, is like, and you don't do that like over a long period of time. Every single day, I think you need to have that. How many things did you do today that you didn't want to do? You know,
Why is that important? Why is it important to do the things you don't want to do?
because everyone wants to do the imagining, everybody wants to do the visualization, right? But they don't want to do the action. But the action is what really drives the character. The visualization and all that is great, you know, because you want to know what direction you're going. But the action is really what brings your subconscious mind to believe this is the kind of person I am.
You know, you just brought up two things in my head real fast. First off, I was talking actually David Tilney last week. We were having a disagreement on how to structure a certain type of deal.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said to him is, you know, I've done these types of deals 1,000 times, David. Well, when I got off the phone, my wife jumped my ass. And I said, for what? She said, you haven't done that deal structure 1,000 times. You've done it maybe 4 or 5 times. And I said, well, that's what I meant. And she said, no. You've only done it 4 or 5 times. So when you go to someone, and she said, I've heard you say that before, where you'll tell someone, I've done that 100 times. I know how to do this. And I explained to her, I said, understand is in my world that when I go for my walks or my runs or what I'm doing, I will sit back and role play. I talk out loud. If you ever see me walking around town or something, I talk out loud to myself. I'm that nutty guy you're thinking, who is he talking to? And I put earbuds in so people think I'm on the phone, but I'm not.
Yeah.
And but what I'm doing is I'm talking to myself, giving myself a scenario. If this happens, what would I say to that person? What documents would need? What has to be in those documents? You know, how would I structure this? Who would I close with? How would the closing be set up? Where would the funds come from? And I'll get home, and when I'm sitting at home, I doodle on a notepad, and I do the same thing. Maybe someone called me that day with a problem they had, and I'll write down the problem, and I'll talk to them on the phone. But let's say the conversation was only 10 minutes long because I was busy. That night, I will go in maybe 6 or 7 other ways that deal could have been structured. So when I sit back and say I've done the deal 1,000 times, I have here.
Right. Right.
And I explained to her, I said, have you ever watched an Olympic diver? To me, the greatest diver I ever saw was Greg Louganis. Phenomenal diver. Just never saw anything like him. But before he went off, even climbed the diving board, you would watch him close his eyes. And you would see him go through the dive 10, 15 times. And
Yeah.
each time he landed it perfectly. And then he got on the board, and then all he did is let his body follow his mind.
Right.
So I think it's really important that when you're structuring deals, you have to do this in your head over and over and over. So truly, when I talked to David, I had done that deal structure 1,000 times and thought about it 100 different ways. But as far as actually doing it, maybe 3, maybe 4 times. And
I think and by doing that, you're building the character. Like, so when you're almost taking action, but in your mind,
yes,
it's really hard to quit when you're taking action. You know.
So let's go to that for a second. So this leads to the second half. When I wanted to become, not about me, let's go to somebody else. So someone wants to become a successful real estate investor. Investor meaning you're going to own rental property, you're going to do notes. I want you to make a list of everything you need to do, every goal that you need to accomplish to allow you to accomplish that goal. Make a list. It's going to be a long list. It's a hard list. But make the list. And when you get done, because that's going to take you a couple days, and when you get done and you look at that list, and maybe a number of pages long, I want you to go back and look over that list of the tasks that will be required of you. And I want you to circle the ones that are too hard for you to do. You know, for me, it was, I had to make 25 written offers a week. I had to knock on the first door Monday morning, 9 a.m. I had to knock doors until 30 minutes before sunset. I had to get to offer number 25 that week before I was allowed to stop and go do something else. Take my wife out to dinner, go work with the horses, put up fence line, go be with my friends, go do a meeting, whatever else. But that had to come first. So you have to go and make a list or circle those things on the list. They're too hard to do. You just don't want to go do and say, I hate that.
Yeah.
Then I want you to think about it and realize, go look at your goal again and put a line through it, because you're not going to achieve that goal. Because there's things on the list you're not willing to go do. You're not willing to pay the price that's required to achieve your goal. So go back and then redo your goal, or go back and look at the things you circled that you don't want to do and say, is my goal big enough for me? Is it important enough to me that I'm going to do these things no matter what, even though they're hard, uncomfortable, whatever?
Yeah.
Well, I go do them anyway. And if you will uncircle those things, and you'll go do those things, especially the hard stuff. And hard stuff doesn't mean like a one-shot deal. You know what it was like, again, when I was building the career with real estate, to go out 9 a.m. Monday morning, every Monday morning, knocking on that first damn door. And I've been knocking doors for a living since I was 12 years old. And I promise you, there's never been a day in my life I've ever woken up and I went, oh, good, I get to go knock doors today. I get to go talk to people.
Yeah.
I get up in the morning and just go, shit. But it's the price that was required to be paid.
Yeah. Let me
And
ask you.
that's why when you were talking about that you got to go do the things. And that's what I heard you say, Paul. And again, I wanted to tell those two stories, which was first, in my head, I do the deals over and over and over again. And number two is I make that list and then follow the list.
Yeah. What you notice is, especially like in selection, people don't quit during a lot of times.
Define selection.
Going through like buds, seal selection.
Define what buds is.
Basic underwater demolition.
But what is it? There's a lot of people that don't know what military is.
A 6-month process of, you start with a few hundred guys, and you go through first phase, which is just a beat down with some little bit of training, but basically just trying to figure out who wants to be there. And that's
when you say beat down, what are the things they do to you during beat down?
A lot of exercise. They just try to keep you as miserable as possible and give you lack of sleep.
How cold is the water?
It depends on the time of year. It could go from 50 to 70. But the warmer the water, the longer they just keep you in there. I mean, I think the thing is it's what you see is that when you're going through that, when you're running under a boat or you're on a log, you barely lose anybody, right? But when you're sitting down and you're comfortable and you're eating that MRE on the beach and you're just eating there and you're just thinking about the next evolution, that's when everybody is just decimated.
See, I thought it would be when you're about to get in the water again because the water is freezing, or you're about to pick up the log again because your shoulders are.
We lost a bunch of people after we took a nap. I remember we took a nap. It was like on Tuesday or Wednesday. I forget which day it was. You take like a few hour nap, and
is this during Hell Week?
During Hell Week, yeah. Yep. You take this nap, and you are just so warm and comfortable in there, and the staff just comes in and they just kind of tap you on the shoulder and they're like, hey, go get in the water. And people were just like, some people were just like, no, I'm done. It wasn't when they were like yelling and screaming and, people you're on the log, you're under a boat. I mean, yeah, you'll lose 1 or 2 people there, but when you're moving, it's very hard to quit, because you actually, like, when you're taking action, you believe in yourself. Your subconscious mind starts to think, this is the kind of person I am. So every victory is really, really important. And I think people minimize the little victories every day. And I think that's a big problem, is they never look at the victories. Because if by you getting up at 9 o'clock in the morning, going door knocking when you didn't want to, I mean, dude, do you want to talk about something, just the intrinsic value of that? I don't think people put enough value on just the character development, because you really believe in who you are now because of those things that you did. Like, you're willing to pay the price. That's who you are now. So I think that there's people want it to be like, oh, I want to believe in myself, then I'm going to do it. But that's not the order it really happened.
No.
So I think that a lot of times I'm just working because I have to generate business some way, but I'm also saying to myself, even if nothing came of this, it would still be worth it, because at the end of the day, when I put my head on my pillow, I want to believe in myself. I need to believe in myself. I think that's really, really important. It's more important for me to believe in myself than for me to have any kind of success. Because when you believe in yourself, there's hope, and hope is huge. I would rather have hope than any kind of material success sometimes, because when things get really, really bad, you always kind of feel like you're going to rise above it. You always kind of feel like, I can conquer this, because I wasn't just going for the reward. I was also going for the individual. Who am I going to be if I stick around?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's what the people that made it through, they always had hope. Like, I'm going to be able to rise above this, even though this is really, really bad.
One of the things you said, and I never, and those of you who don't know what Buds is, I've never seen it. If you go to YouTube and you put in Navy SEALs Buds Class 234, they did about a 4 or 5 hour, but not biography, but like a PBS special sort of thing. It's a great video that I've watched that a bunch of times over the years, because to me it symbolized who quit and who didn't quit. And a lot of times the people you thought would never ever even think about quitting, they were the best athlete, the smartest, the handsomest. They were some of the first to go. And the people that you just thought would never make it, they just refused to quit. And important, but go get that class. It's Buds VUDS 234, and something good to watch. But anyway, so one of the things you said, Paul, that I thought was fascinating, I never thought about this, but when you're going through, let's say, Hell Week, when you're in Buds, I always thought people would quit when they had to get back in the water, or when they're under the log, or I can't imagine what sand does to you. I kept seeing wet and sandy, and it's like, I know what sand does to me if I just get a little bit of sand in my shorts to go for a run. Between my legs, it's kind of raw meat, and I can't imagine what you guys are doing, because you're just there for like months at a time.
Right.
But it's when you have the downtime where you can think about it.
Oh yeah.
That's when, and I never, you see I just took that from this program, and it goes back also to, I had to knock on that first door Monday morning at 9 a.m. I had to be there, and it was awful. It was awful getting up that morning. I could come up with 1,000 things, reorganize my office, read one more Jack Miller manual, call Pete Fortune on the phone, and talk about a deal structure. I had trees down across the fence line. The horses may get out. I can come up with 10,000 reasons not to be at that door 9 a.m. on Monday morning.
Yeah.
And it was because I was coming out of relaxed time, downtime. And on Sunday night, I started getting the butterflies in my stomach, thinking, this could be the day that I get yelled at, or whatever happens, or I don't want to go do this.
Yeah.
And I never realized that till you just said what you said. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny how many things in life you can apply to other situations.
You talked about a lot of times people sabotage themselves. How so?
I think that a lot of times we believe we are our mind a little bit. Like those thoughts that we have on your downtime, you believe that's who you are, And I think a lot of special operations guys, SEALs, whatever, anybody that's in special operations is really good at not like identifying with their thoughts. Like you were like, I want to quit, but you're like, I don't care if I want to quit. You're not like, that's who I am. You just ignore those things. You're just like, that's just a thought. Like, I don't care about my thoughts. The only thing I care about is the who I'm planning on being. So any thought that comes across my mind that is counter to what I want, you just completely ignore it. You're like, oh, that doesn't mean anything. You're almost too dumb. That's why I think that's why they call it too dumb to quit, because there's not a good word for like what I just described.
Yeah.
You just don't care. You're good at compartmentalizing those thoughts. You're like, oh, cool, I want to quit. Well, I'm going to get back on the boat, or I'm going to go knock on the door, because that thought means absolutely nothing.
So someone who quits pretty easily, Is that just something they haven't learned how not to quit, or is it their DNA that says they're just quitters? That's just who they are.
Of course not. No, I think that there are people that have the information, the people who have been through the trials in their life. Some of the best SEALs I ever met grew up that they were criminals when they were before they joined the military. They were they were orphans. They didn't have all these uh, accolades behind them. They had been through so much that when things get hard, they're like, oh, I'm doing it right. So it's when everything has come easy to you, then when things start to get hard, you're like, oh, I must be doing it wrong. So the signals are messed up. The signals are messed up. When I was growing up, things were hard for me. I didn't pick up things real quickly. I was just an average guy, and I had to work really hard to be good at anything. So fast forward to buds. I mean, when things started getting hard, I was kind of like, okay, I'm doing it right. Because one, I'm still here, but two, that's the way it's supposed to be. So I think people, one, they overthink it, and two, they don't have the character before they come to the moment. Right now we're in a recession, or now we're in this coronavirus thing. When everything was really going well, the signal is money's easy, money's easy, money's easy. And then once the signal switches, now they're saying, okay, well, I guess I need to quit. Instead of saying, no, I'm doing it right. If it's getting hard, that means that I'm doing it right. Now that doesn't mean you don't shift your strategy. It doesn't mean you don't, if you keep hitting the wall, you don't just keep doing it, because I don't quit anything ever. But there's a big difference between just stopping and quitting and switching strategy. So I think that's what I meant by self-sabotage, is you haven't cultivated that character prior to.
One of the stories I love, I read her book. Do you know who Diana Nyad is? Okay. One of the podcasts I listen to a lot is called Teams Never Quit. Marcus Luttrell, and I think now his brother's on it with him. But anyway, they interviewed Diana Nyad in one of the early shows. So Diana Nyad was never a super fast swimmer. She could just swim without stopping for a long period of time. But she was never in the Olympics. She was never that person. And she had the goal of swimming from Cuba to the Florida Keys, be the first person who swam from Cuba to America. And she tried it the first time and she quit.
Yeah.
And she tried it a second time and she quit. She had great reasons. I mean, she was stung by jellyfish like there was no tomorrow. Being in the salt water for 90 hours kind of has a tendency to, do a lot of damage to a body.
Right.
Being in constant motion for 90 hours because you can't sleep, right?
Yeah.
There's no sleeping. You got to keep going. You can't touch a boat. You can't touch anybody around you. And so she went on a third time, and she really did a lot of work getting ready for that third time, and she quit.
Yeah.
So none of the times did she make it across. And there's great reasons for her to quit. The tide was against her. The water, the current was blowing her too much one way or the other. The food was wrong. She got sick. She got this. She had food poisoning, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then she went for a fourth time. And she was like 64 or 65 years old. She was not a kid.
Yeah.
So she had been a much better swimmer when she was in her 30s and she tried this. And now she's 64, 65 years old. And the media came out and said it's just a stunt. She wants to be in the limelight. She'll never make it. She's always quit.
Yeah.
Do you know that she swam from Cuba to the Florida Keys without stopping? And she was 64 or 65 years old. And when someone thinks, they want a reason to quit, get in the ocean for 90 hours to swim. See how that works out for you and see what it's like. But each time she quit, each time she was forced to withdraw, she learned something.
Yeah.
Each time there was a different lesson to learn until she had learned enough lessons to where when she went that last time in her mid 60s, and she's still the only person who's made that swim.
Well, I mean, I think that goes to speak to like the human spirit, you know, how do you cultivate that spirit? And I think a lot of times we, especially guys, we are too good at compartmentalizing different aspects of our life, you know? And I think a lot of times you think that being strong is the best thing, but a lot of times you're strongest when you're really, really weak because,
How?
um, so I think that when you're relying on your physical strength, you're in a you're it's a dangerous place to be in because as soon as you get physically tired, you no longer have the will to continue. All right. So what happens a lot of times when think about your situation with real estate. You talked about working at home, working at what is it, Home Depot, and you were like take a part-time position at Home Depot at one point,
Yeah.
and the guy passed away. You watched him die. He passed out, and you're like, I'm never going to be that guy who
Had to work at Home Depot.
had to work at Home Depot, and so there's these triggers in life that you become obsessed with your goal, and I think that maybe for this lady, maybe she got to the point where it's like, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And so a lot of times so bringing us back to the compartmentalization thing, we say, oh, well, my life situation has nothing to do with it. And I think that's exactly wrong. I think that a lot of times, if we want to move toward that goal, you're a lot like a ship, but the ship has like giant patches of coral attached to the bottom of it. And so you got to start eliminating things off the bottom of the ship, and then finally you can fly in a straight line. And I think that's where we are in life. We'll say, okay, well, I really want this goal, but your life situation is too comfortable, right? So you cannot get yourself you're too comfortable. So you're even as much as I talk about wanting to be successful in real estate, if I'm too comfortable, I'm not going to have the will and the spirit. Spirit is unbodily strength. I'm not going to have the spirit to continue, right? So what do I do when my life is comfortable? I've got a pretty comfortable life, right? I've got a wife, 3 kids. I have a house over my head. I've got clothes, food. I think a lot of times when we're talking about not quitting, what we're really talking about is how do I succeed and then continue going? You know what I mean? I think that's even harder. It's easy to fail and then to get pissed and continue on. To me, that's a little bit easier to fail and then continue on because you're pissed, and you learn, you want to grow. How do you succeed and then take it an extra mile is really where I'm going for. I want to be just as motivated after I succeed as when I was on day 1, week 1 of Buzz, right? So the way you got to do that is you have to start eliminating things from your life. If you have a toxic relationship, not your marriage, but I'm talking like with a friend who is an alcoholic, and maybe you only go out with him once a month, but when you do go out with him once a month, like you guys really let go. I think that needs to be eliminated, at least for a certain point of time. And in my mind, everything is on the table when it comes to what I want to get out of life. You cannot say, oh yeah, I want to be a real estate professional, but I'm addicted to this thing. That has to go too. So whenever my energy is sucked up, whenever my spirit and my will to just go is I feel like it's being drained, I'm like, what is draining me? Is it the news? All right, well then I can't watch that anymore. It's got to go. I don't care how good it is. I don't care how justified I am in watching it. It just has to go. So we're too logical with those kinds of things. If I feel like something in my life is making me too comfortable, I get rid of it because I would rather have the hope and the spirit to conquer than any other comfort in life. That's what I think happiness is. I think happiness is having that hope, having that spirit to conquer life circumstances. Depression is being in a circumstance but not having the will to conquer it. That's the worst feeling in the world. Is you have things you need to do, but you don't have the will to do it. And to me, that's what depression really is. It's like you just can't get out of bed. You can't, and I've felt that. I felt that a little bit leaving the command and coming to a different situation, you feel like that. So right now I'm in that process of like, what in my life do I need to just get rid of? Because I've got things I want to do. So
It's not just get rid of, it's add. So give you
right.
a good, so part of what you said, I 100% agree with you, is if you ever look at my friends, and again, Paul and I are friends, and you can tell just by listening to him, when I talk to him, he pumps me up, and hopefully it's vice versa. And that's true for all my friends. They're upbeat, they're moving forward, they're charging, they're trying to get somewhere. They don't know, they don't quit, they just keep going. We laugh about what's going on with the coronavirus. It's kind of like, yeah, whatever. They're telling tenants don't pay, and we just kind of laugh about it. But everybody just keeps marching forward. But I will tell you, I get rid of the negative people in my life. And again, maybe they drink, or they run around their wives, or they're not a good parent, or not good to be around, or they have a temper they can't control. I don't want those people around me because they affect me. And one of the things I've learned is, I can pull somebody along, but I can't push a rope. And if someone's a rope, you just push it, it doesn't do anything, right? And I learned not to try to fix those people. I don't, in the end, they bring me down, and I don't really have a long-term effect on them, because that's where they're choosing to be. And so to go along with what you said about getting rid of things, also like getting rid of the barnacles, you have to add things. So I add in positive all the time. So one of the things, I told you about listening to the podcast on Teams Never Quit, or Team Never Quit. I listen to those podcasts. Another one is Paul Harvey. He was a big guy on the radio back when I was a kid, and he has something he did called The Rest of the Story. Go to YouTube, look up Paul Harvey's The Rest of the Story, because he tells the biography about somebody. Each one used to be on every Friday, was somebody different. And he wouldn't use their name. You didn't know who he's talking about, but you would be amazed by the poverty they endured, or the hardships in their life. And all of a sudden you find out it's like Albert Einstein, or Roosevelt, or Patton, or someone that you just didn't expect. And then when you realize, oh my God, they went through all this hell on earth, and they still made it. So you have got to pump in the positive. And so yes, turn off the TV, turn off the news. If I hear one more time about how awful, how evil Donald Trump is, or how awful or how evil, I don't know, Nancy Pelosi is, they're not in my world, and I don't need to hear it. Just go. They need to go do their jobs, and then let's just keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's a big thing I've learned too. That's, when you're, like I said, in the military, it's a lot easier to stay driven, because, when I'm out in a desert training, and you're working these long days, and you're just barely getting enough sleep. You're not paying attention to all that stuff, so you're just too busy to let those things drain you. Whereas civilian life, it's much, I don't want to say like softer. A lot of ways I would say it's a lot harder, because it's softer. It's harder because, when you're deployed, your job is to work, and you're around a bunch of like-minded other guys that are doing the same thing. And you're more uncomfortable, but you have the spirit and the will to continue.
You're part of a team.
Exactly.
And that's what was the hardest part when I worked for Electrolux, or as a real estate investor. There was no team. There was just me and my wife, but I was out there knocking on the doors. And when I was putting myself through college, and I'm selling vacuums door to door, you know what it's like for an 18-year-old kid to be from the South in Norwalk, Connecticut, going out door knocking, carrying a vacuum under his arm, everybody laughing. Not everybody, but people will laugh. And you really do that? You guys still go door to door? Yeah. And when I go to a party, my buddies I'd be talking to a pretty girl, and my friends would come over and say, hey, Bill, tell her what you do for a living. Let's see if she sticks around. But you're out there by yourself, and that's much tougher. And I think, that's why I always would take someone, not always, but a lot of times when I was out door knocking, I would call one of my friends under the guise of I was helping them, and I would put them in my car. So I'd go, I'd get them out from behind their computer screen and take them out with me. But they didn't realize I was really doing it for me, because I had somebody out there with me. It made me work harder. And this goes all the way back to when I was 18 years old. And again, with Electrolux. And where we lived, it was in Southern Connecticut. It was on Long Island Sound. And we lived in Westport. And they have a really nice beach in Westport. And I'm 18 years old. Well, the girls are at the beach, I want to go to the beach. And I knew if I went to the beach, I wouldn't be going to college because I had to put my way through. So I say that to say this. I would go to my boss, his name was Charles Maglio, and say, Charlie, give me somebody to train. And a lot of times the people I was training, they'd be 40, 45 years old. I'm 18, 19 years old. And he's like, you're not getting anything for this. Why do you want to train them? I said, oh, I enjoy teaching. The real thing is, I knew if I had somebody with me, I would go do the demos, and I would do good demos because I had to teach them and show them the right way. I couldn't shortcut things. And that kind of made it more of a team effort, and it kept me going. But when you're out there by yourself, and Paul, you've sent me a number of videos, and we've talked a number of times, when you're out door knocking and you're by yourself, that's pretty damn hard. That's isolated. And that makes it tougher than if you were out there with 10 of your buddies.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's you have to say, because I remember, when I was getting ready to come to the military, I mean, I would just do anything, I would do anything. And it wasn't just because it wasn't because I was some special person. It was because my life circumstances, everything was just aligning me to go in that direction. So that was the only thing I really cared about. So I didn't care what it took. I didn't care. I just did whatever it took. So in a way, I think that's the way we're supposed to live. I think that's the way human beings are really supposed to live.
You said one of the things you said about not quitting is you should always be improving.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I mean, that's like what everybody says, right? Not improving, but I think that there needs to be an intrinsic satisfaction with being good at something. And I think that instead of saying like, oh, I'm just, instead of doing this for the money, you're saying like, no, I'm going to get better and I'm developing a skill set. It's more of like a craftsman mindset rather than just this transactional mindset where you just do the thing and you get paid. It's more like, no, you get that intrinsic satisfaction of actually improving at something and building better systems, building a better company, eliminating expenses so that you can build a better, culture for your team, for the people that work around you, and I think that's a big thing that I'm realizing is like the more I can, the simpler my life is, the more I can give to the people that are around me, and so I'm learning that, because obviously everybody needs to make money, but the more I can cut back, the more I can give, so to me, that's a really big part. And that's something that I'm learning, especially now that I'm as a real estate agent, as an investor. I think that I'm learning that, the more I can cut back on those things, the less I need. And the more I can just look at it like I'm doing this to get better at it, to bring greater value to people, the more I'm actually going to enjoy it. The more I'm actually going to enjoy my job, rather than saying this job is just it's just a means to this end of being financially free. That is, of course, something I would like to do, right? But the less I need, I don't need $100,000 a month to be financially free, right? What if I needed $6,000 a month to be financially free? And then you can start giving back to the people that work for you, to the people that are around you. I had an experience this 2 weeks ago. Well, it started 2 weeks ago. I talked to this lady. She wanted to buy a home. Got her on the phone, and I said, well, do you want to work with a realtor? Oh, no, I'm not interested in working with a realtor. I'm like, okay, sounds good. 2 weeks later, she calls me with her daughter on the phone to basically interview me. And she went from having a budget up here to, after I talked to her, she was like, oh, I guess I need to bring my budget down here. But I think that if she would have talked to a different realtor, they probably would have tried to get her to buy a house up here, but that wasn't what she got from me, because I didn't need to close that deal, right? I didn't have to do it. It wasn't like that was like, I had to pay my car payment with that transaction, so there wasn't as much neediness there. And so a week later, we wrote an offer last night, because she trusted me. She's like, I know a ton of realtors, but you shot straight with me, and you didn't try to convince me, and you didn't try to talk me into anything I didn't want to do. Now that wasn't because I'm such a special human being. It was just because of my life situation that I've designed for myself. I'm capable and allowed to do that with her. So to me, that's really been really powerful. And I haven't really been able to experience too much of that being working for the government. So now the closer I get to retirement, the more I'm like, you know what? How cool would it be to need significantly less to live on, so that when somebody like that calls me and really needs my help, I can develop a relationship with this person instead of trying to get them to close the following week. And so that's really the intrinsic joy that I've really received from doing real estate in the short amount of time that I've been doing it, is like, man, it's really nice to just help somebody and offer value and not need the money.
And you're coming from a really good spot inside you.
Exactly.
And it goes back to when I was 19, I was having a hard summer selling, and it looked like I would not make enough money. We were in June, and I just wasn't getting the sales. And my mother brought home a course from Zig Ziglar, and it's called Secrets or See You at the Top. And in it, and I know you've heard the story a bunch of times, Paul, but anyway, in it, I heard Zig Ziglar say, you'll get exactly what you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want. And I've got to tell you, that made all the difference to me, because my mother, who also worked for Electrolux, was a great salesperson. She had that ability. She had the killer instinct. She could close hard. She was a great salesperson, and I never was. But I was really good at service. I could take care of someone. That was my natural instinct, was the service side of things. And when I heard him say that, I knew that from that point forward, I would give people the best service they've ever had from anybody, anytime, anywhere. And I used to say that when I'd be leaving the door, say, I'll see you in 3 months. Remember, I give you the best service you've ever had from anybody, anytime, anywhere. And then fast forward to when I got into real estate investing when I was 35. And I changed Zig's saying around to say that our job as investors, and this goes along with what Paul's saying now, is not to buy, sell, or rent houses. Our job is to help people solve their real estate problems. But to solve the problems, you have to care. You have to sit and listen. You have to ask questions. And it's going to take a while. And you've got to ask the hard questions, not just general questions. And that's what Paul was doing to find out what was going on in this woman's life. It wasn't about getting the listing. It was about helping. And then when I was 56, I just shortened everything to every day, go out and find people to help and find problems to solve. And if you do that, it makes it easy to talk to people, because you're trying to find out, where does it hurt? What's going on? You're not trying to do to someone. And you heard Paul say that. He wasn't doing something to someone. He was doing something for someone. And it makes talking to people so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the difference between failing and quitting?
So, it's pretty obvious, I guess. People say, "Oh, I quit that," and I'm like, "No, you didn't. You just failed, and you continued on." But I think that people are too hard on themselves a lot of times. I think that I've known a lot of unbelievable SEALs who gave their life for this country that quit. They quit. Buds, they quit different things, and they literally gave their life for their platoon, for the guys that are around them. So, what else are you supposed to do as a person, as an individual in the military? We honor the people that sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And somebody who quits doesn't mean that that's who you are. You quit in your head and you're like, I quit, dang it, but a lot of times the people that quit, they go back, they reset, they regroup, they learn from it, and then they continue on, and they're 10 times the person that they were before. And I remember a guy who's no longer with us was killed, and a guy I worked with was killed in Iraq. And I remember right before Buds, we were standing a watch together, and he was telling me about how he quit Buzz the first time. I was like, really? Wow, that's it's crazy, and you're back. And he went on to be a phenomenal SEAL, and he passed away, provided cover fire for his platoon in Iraq, and was killed, he died in circumstances where most people would have run away, most people would have quit, most people would have been scared, and he was, he died with honor, obviously. And I mean, what else? What else are we supposed to be doing? So if you look at that quitting, even if people are going through this coronavirus thing and they quit short term, they're just go back, regroup, figure out a different strategy, a different method, whatever it is, and then attack it again. Keep going.
Why didn't your friend quit? Why didn't he run? Why didn't he run?
Why didn't he?
Why
Well,
didn't he run?
yeah, I mean, obviously I can't speak for him, and I wasn't there when it all went down. But
You've seen other people, similar situations, and sometimes people run, they quit, and sometimes they don't. What's the difference?
It's who you are. It's who you are. It wasn't because he was some special person. He just put on a Superman cape under duress. He became that person. But it was only because he had quit that he became that person, because he went through the adversity. And he knew he had been in the place where he wanted to quit. And then he did it. And then he learned from it, So.
Well, one of the things I learned early on, and again, my mother made sure I was listening to the good tapes from the good speakers. So Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, those are the two that come to mind really quick. And I understood the difference early on between quitting and failing. And to me, quitting was more of a permanent thing. A failure is you just didn't get it done. Whatever happened, you didn't get it done. But then you go back and you try again and you try again and you try again. But I always kind of define quitting as much more permanent. And I was always terrified of quitting something. And I know that when I was a kid, I was a swimmer. I started swimming at AAU when I was 14 years old. So that's you go to swim practice at 5:30 in the morning. You swim before school, and then you go back at 3:30 in the afternoon and you swim after school. And you do that for 6 days a week. Saturday is just one swim, but it's 3 hours long, 7 to 10. And by the time I was 18, I was over it. I was done. I was supposed to go to college on a scholarship. But believe me, I was so sick of swimming by that time, I'd rather go sell vacuums door to door on straight commission than go get back in the pool. I just could not do it anymore. And when I went to my parents and said, I'm not going to go to school on scholarship, I can't swim anymore. And my dad started calling me a quitter. And that really bothered me because I had proved everything I needed to prove as a swimmer, and I went and did something else. So be mindful of quitting, be mindful of failing. So with swimming, I did quit. Now I ended up going back to swim when I was an adult and still swim to this day. In fact, I'm waiting for the virus to end because I'm kind of here in Adairsville. No, there's a pool in Carsville that I always swim at and can't wait to get back in it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about one of the things that you said, which makes you kind of unique, is you like it when things are hard. Because you kind of talked earlier about things are easy and that's kind of scary, but you like it when things are hard. How come?
Well, I guess for me, I was never, like I said, I was just an average guy. So, I wasn't particularly athletic or anything like that. I always felt like I had to work really hard at school, at sports, and anything I was going to do. So when things got challenging, I was like, okay, this is business as usual. And then I learned to enjoy the hard things. I learned to you almost get satisfaction from things because of the way I grew up, and from my dad, the way my dad brought me up, the way my football coach brought me up. I mean, it was just like all these people I had in my life that really taught me a lot. So that when things were challenging, I guess there's a little bit of pride too, or as soon as things get hard, people start quitting. You're like, yes, you're almost like happy. You're like, good, you're like, all right, I'm still here. So a lot of times I just think like, okay, once things are hard, then this is where this is like the equalizer. I remember being in Hell Week and feeling like, finally, the professional triathlete and professional football player look just like me now. They're completely emaciated. All that muscle they had, all that cardio they had has been just completely wiped out through no sleep. they feel absolutely horrendous. And I'm like, welcome to my world. You know what I mean? So, I was like always getting, they call it the goon squad, the guys that just get
in the back.
You're in the back of the run and you just get completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, all the guys that are in shape and just like.
Were you were in the goon squad, were you?
Oh, dude, I got gooned all the time.
Oh, I can't believe that.
Oh yeah.
You look like a fast runner, so I would think you'd be up at the front.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay. I'm okay, but like I'm not a lot of these guys are just like unbelievable. A lot of these guys are unbelievable athletes. So when things were good, they would just smoke the rest of us. But what's funny is like the guys that got gooned. A lot of people that got gooned ended up making it through, because when push came to shove and things got really, really terrible, that was where we lived. So nothing was wrong, So I think that's kind of where I learned. Throughout my life, I've just kind of had to be kind of a bottom feeder a little bit. And so when things got bad.
See, I just saw you'd be I thought you'd be that guy who was very fleet of foot. You look like a cross country runner, and I just thought, never a goon on the beach.
Yeah, my friends used to say, "Oh, yeah, Paul, he's all show, no go." I'm like the Corvette with the Volkswagen engine.
But there's a Volkswagen engine that doesn't stop.
Yeah.
But that's the key. That's the key. You just can't stop.
It's a diesel.
When I was door knocking, Kim and I had a RIA, a real estate investor group here in Cartersville. Grew to like 2,400 people, and no one could understand why I would have a RIA. Why I'd run a RIA right in the center of my area, and then teach people everything I knew how to do.
Yeah.
And I always laughed. I said, they said, "Don't you worry about the competition." And I said, "No, they stir up the waters." And I said, because they get something going, but they don't know how to finish it. So they would call me up and say, "We have this thing." The other thing that would happen is they would go out into one of my neighborhoods door knocking, and they would see my cards in the door. And they would go to maybe 3 or 4 of those doors and keep seeing my cards. And again, because I worked the same area over and over and over, every 3 months I went back to my area, door knocking. So the homeowners all knew me. So if another investor knocked on that door, that homeowner would say, "You're in Bill's neighborhood. Why are you here? I need to call him. He told me to call him if another investor showed up." And I knew what was happening is that other investor was getting kicked in we'll just call it the stomach. They were getting kicked in the stomach, and they were going to go home and lick their wounds.
Yeah.
And if I saw their card in one of the doors in my neighborhood, it revved me up. Right. It was like, "Oh yeah, now let's dance." Because I was going to go to everywhere they had been and keep sticking cards in, and then I would find out where that person lived, that investor lived, and I would go by his house, and I would knock on every door around his house because I knew he wouldn't knock on those. And I would put my offers in on every 4 or 5 houses to the left, 4 or 5 houses to the right, 4 or 5 houses across the street, and then I'd put an offer in his door to let him know I'd been there. Is he willing to go do that? And most of the time they weren't. So I didn't see them as competition. They motivated me.
Right. Yeah, most people have the opposite reaction,
One of the things you also talked about, and this goes back to your military background, is when you plan, you make a very detailed plan. So as real estate investors, you look at, the next month, the next year, what will you be doing? So you lay out a plan. And so you're hoping the plan will come off, but there's a good chance that things won't work exactly like you planned. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, I guess I never knew that I was a creative person. I joined the military when I was 18, and I never thought of myself as a creative person. But what I learned is that, the better you get at something, you start getting really good at stuff in the military. You develop a trade per se, and you start getting good at it. Well, once you kind of develop a baseline of knowledge, baseline skill, now you can finally start kind of looking up, you know what I mean? And like seeing 2 steps ahead and anticipating stuff. And, what you kind of learn, and this is where people either go left or they go right at that point. They'll start getting good at something, but then they become too rigid. right? So there's the book, there's you're coming out with an options manual soon, and there's the options book. Bill laid it out. This is how you do this option. This is that option. And so you've got the book, and you've learned the book, right? And so you plan, and then you get to the target, and now the target is completely different. You did all this stuff, and now this building is way smaller than you thought it was going to be, and the pen with all the animals is on the other side, and instead of everybody be sleeping on the inside, everybody's sleeping on the roof or on the outside. So it's just like I always, the best people that I saw, and a lot of my mentors, what they were really good at was working very, very hard in the planning stage. But then once they got to the target, it was the intent was here, but the way we got to that intent was always dynamic. It was always changing, and they were ready to change the plan with the situation. They let the situation tell them what to do instead of trying to force what they wanted onto the target, right? So as a real estate professional, you always talk about this, and I thought this was so awesome. And this is the reason why I love real estate, is because you can do all the learning, you can do all the planning, but once you get to the person, once I get on the phone with an individual or I meet up with them, I never assume they want to sell their house. I never assume they want to buy. I always think to myself, how do I solve the problem? The intent is to solve the problem, not to make a commission, not to try to talk them into anything. Because a lot of times as real estate professionals, we have we have a whole bin of options for them, but most people, they're like, well, I can either buy or I can sell or I can rent. That's it, So what's really fun is going in, getting on target per se as a real estate professional by meeting with somebody, and you have all of these tools at your disposal, and then you just solve the problem. That's it. It's not solve the problem and a little bit extra. It's just, what's the minimum required solution here to get these people where they need to be? So that's what's really, again, intrinsically satisfying about real estate, is it allows me to take that creative side of me and help people on a daily basis. So,
one of the things you just said, people always ask, how do I know what deal structuring tool or tools to use when I go meet with a seller? They say, well, just say they're not a buyer, they're a seller. And the answer is, I don't go in with anything on my mind. I don't go in saying I'm sure this will be a subject to deal, or I'm sure that this is going to be a master lease with an option. I have no thought whatsoever as to the structure. And the reason why is I don't know what their problem is. And it's kind of like if a doctor walks in, if you're a patient in a doctor's office and the doctor comes in and said, you need a penicillin shot and you need to take these 3 pills, but he never asked you a question about where it hurts or what's going on. And then he just turned around and walked out. Would you take the shot or would you take the pills? And the answer is no. You'd be like, hey, he doesn't know what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And so I find a lot of investors, all they know, and they're not even investors, they're business people, they're capitalists. They buy a can of beans for $1. They sell the can of beans for $3. They get to keep 25 cents of what they make after expenses and taxes. And if all you know how to do is make a 70 cent on the dollar offer, if that is your world as a creative deal structurer, and you got to go to a hard money lender to get that money, then that's not structuring. That is called the big damn hammer. You know one way to structure a deal, bam, and that's it.
Yeah.
So when I go in, I don't know what the structure is going to be because I don't understand the problem. And the way I learn the problem is I just start asking questions, and I ask a tremendous amount of questions. Every time someone's been in a house with me, the one thing they say to me when we're done is, I can't believe how many questions you asked that person. And I can't believe they actually answer the questions you ask, because I don't just ask the easy questions. I've got to ask the hard questions because I've got to dig, I got to poke, I got to find out where it hurts. And so I don't go in saying that this will be a sub 2 deal. I go in saying, I don't know what it's going to be. I do know that 90% of the time, I'm not the best solution to the person's problem. I know what that solution is. I know what that best solution is. And I tell them, this is what they should go do. I'm still going to make the written offer. Because maybe maybe I am a solution, not the best solution, but I may be the quickest solution for them, and they want fast over best.
Right.
So don't ever think that you need to go in and know ahead of time. And people say, how do you structure the deals? Really easy answer. The homeowner tells me. The owner, they give me the answers to the questions, and based on what they tell me, I know what tools to take out of the deal structuring toolbox that will work best for them. And it's like you said, Paul, just the facts, ma'am. Get to the point. Doesn't have to be real intricate. Just come up with those tools and fix the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the big thing that people mess up is they either, if you're in a boxing match and somebody throws a jab at you and you're like, you throw yourself back. Like that was too much, that was too much of an overreaction. Same thing. If somebody, is talking, aggressively to you, you just wind up and punch them in the face. That was an overreaction, And so it's like that's the way I kind of look at real estate. It's like, I just want to find I want to find that threshold and find the perfect solution that's just right for that homeowner. And, what really had a big impact on me was something that Pete Fortunato said was, at the end of the most important thing isn't the deal structure or the deal itself or the commission or any of that. It's that you have an ally after the transaction. Going forward, are these people going to call you again for help? And that's really what I'm trying to achieve is I want people to call me after the transaction, and ask for help or anything. So I think that's the most important part. That upfront commission is just like this small amount of money. It doesn't matter,
Yeah, and there's been a bunch of
relationships.
Yeah, some of the best deals I've ever done are deals I didn't do, where I walked away, even at closing table a couple of times. Kim and I have ended it at the closing table because we found out the seller had a better offer, but they just didn't want to say anything, but they were able to make more money. And Kim and I ended the contract, talking to them first.
Yeah.
And then, getting them to go to the other person because they were worried about, we promised you. I said, no, this isn't about promising me anything.
Right.
The best solution, what you said to us is you want to get the most money you can get. This person is willing to pay you $15,000 more than we can.
Yeah.
Then that's who you need to be under contract with.
Yeah.
But those same people would give me 5 or 6 or 7 other leads to other deals. I made so much more money by finding people to help and finding problems to solve. Going back to Zig, you get exactly what you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want.
I guess like how do you? But see, and that's what the thing is I'm learning too, because I'm not, I'm definitely not the example as far as frugality goes. You know what I mean? But what I'm learning is by having your life situation be under control and not having these crazy expenses, it just allows you to really enjoy serving people, and to really help them out and not need to make money. And I think that's the most powerful thing that I'm learning is because I'm still new. I'm a freaking new guy. So it's like, I'm learning that it's such a joy. It's almost more satisfying to talk somebody out of working or selling their home sometimes than it is from actually getting the sale.
Yeah.
Because you almost feel good about it.
But it's because you're doing the right thing. You listen to what they say and you're doing the right thing by them.
Yeah.
And that's our natural instinct as human beings. Some people are just straight out takers, and that's okay. But most of us are not.
Yeah.
Most of us are givers. We're not takers.
Right.
A good example is church. I know that about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I'm Catholic. My wife's Baptist, so you can imagine how well that works. But my wife's only been to Catholic church like once in her life, and it was a Cajun church. My family's from South Louisiana. So she went to the Cajun church. My wife's 5'8", and all my relatives are 5 foot, if that. Those are the men. The women are 4'5". And so whenever, I won't go into all that. Anyway, point of the thing is the church had closed down because of the coronavirus, and he did a webinar church. That was the first one he had ever done. And he said, I'm going to sit out under the awning of the church. And there was a mission that they were supporting in Africa somewhere. And for this particular service, they were trying to raise, I think, $6,000 to send to that mission. And he said, I'm going to sit outside the awning. The church ended at like 10. And he said, I'm going to sit out here till about 12. And then if you feel the need to come by, he said, I'll be under the awning. I'll have my cowboy hat. Just put the money in it and we'll get it to the church. And again, the point of that Sunday service was to raise $6,000. He raised $32,000. And
Wow.
people were coming up and there was a big line. And everybody was surprised, like, what's going on here? But there was a line to get up into the church and then get to the covered area where he was and then get back out again. Again, no one got out of their cars, but it was just amazing to watch. And that's what people were like. And
Yeah.
whenever I ask people, if you were financially free and you can go do anything you want to go do, what would be the 3 things you would do? Here's what I hear over and over again. And if you can, stop the recording. You answer the question. You're financially free. Money is no longer an issue. You can go do whatever you want to go do. What are the 3 things you would go do? Stop the recording. Now, here's what I hear over and over. Number 1 is travel. Number 2 is spend more time with family. And number 3 is help other people. Does that sound like takers to you anywhere along the line? Our nature is to give. That's just the way we're set up. And
Right.
everybody on TV, if you listen to the news all the time, they make it sound like everybody's evil and awful and terrible and they take. And that's just not what we do.
Right. Right.
A question for you, Paul, because this is a question I've never asked you. And I know with real estate investing, especially when me as a door knocker, I was out there and it was a day after day, week after week, year after year thing. It took over 10 years to really learn to master the art of deal structuring. And again, you're by yourself and it's hard. Well, one of the things that you did in the Navy that I could never have done was you were a sniper. So you went through sniper school. And again, I've read up a number of books on sniper school and what y'all go through, and just not my cup of tea. I couldn't be still that long. I can't, have ants crawl over you and, just, go to the bathroom in your pants and you're. So how does your ability, the things you learned at sniper school, does that equate at all? Does that bleed over at all into real estate investing?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of
Patience?
patience. That's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, I think also you learn a balance between speed and being deliberate. Being deliberate with your actions, and sometimes you got to move fast. But then sometimes you got to slow down. And there's people that are like, oh, just move fast, and there's people that are, oh, be very careful. And it's always like, for me, it's always like somewhere in the middle. It's like move fast and deliberate, and there's times for both. So I think that what I've learned is that, and this is not just from being a sniper, it's through everything. It's that I try to be quick, but then I also try to be smooth, and I try to be effective. So I'm always like reassessing what I'm doing. I never, as a sniper, you take one shot. Well, if you miss over the guy's left shoulder, and you squeeze the trigger again in the same location, well, guess what? You're going to get the same result. So you have to change your shot. You got to call different wind. You got to adjust your scope. You got to adjust your body position. You got to make sure you check all these things, and then you take another shot. It's not just well, in the manual it says do this, so that's what I'm going to do. It's like you're always analyzing. You're always taking action, assessing, adjusting, and taking 2 more steps. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing.
I don't like to brag to you, but again, I had a horse ranch and I had a shooting range out back. Again, not to brag.
Yeah.
But I had a 270 that was a really good rifle, and from 100 yards away with the right scope, I could do a grouping 12 inches. Not to brag, but I'm letting you know, I was the kid, baby, on that mountain. Yeah. I was the kid. People were like, they were amazed by, wow, that was 100 yards away too.
Where'd you get that 12-minute gun? I got to get one.
I'm going to switch over to the talk completely from keeping going to plan B. So this is something that kind of came up between us, a conversation you and I were having. And it just fascinated me because a lot of us have a plan B. We have a fallback plan. If we don't make it as real estate investors, then we'll go do this instead. And when I talked to you about this, you were just fascinating. Have at
it. Well, I mean, I guess you know, here's the thing: is you hear everyone talk about that. You know, you hear everybody talk about not having a plan B and all that. And honestly, I did. And you know, when I was going through selection, I didn't, and not because I was like, you know, not because I'd read it in some book somewhere. You know, it was just because that was the only thing in life I wanted. You know, so it wasn't like I planned on not having a plan B. It was just that I couldn't imagine a world where I wasn't a SEAL, you know, because then I would just, whatever it was, I would just go, if they dropped me from training, I would leave and then I would come back to it, you know, and eventually get back and then try again, you know? So I think that's kind of the way I look at real estate as well. It's just, I don't have a plan B, but not because I'm not going to not because I won't ever do anything else. It's just because even if I get knocked off course, I'm always like coming back in, you know, for a rerun, you know. So I think that's more of what it is, you know, because there's things all over YouTube about that, you know, like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger talks about it. He's like, oh, I didn't have a plan B, and you know, everyone's, oh, I don't ever have a plan B, and I think that's true. I think that's true. If you want to be successful in it, sometimes you got to go head first, you know, just go head first, and then life is too short. Life is too short to have that kind of a regret where you didn't, you know, if you just put one foot in. And my wife always gets mad at me, you know, because I'm like that, you know, I'm going to do this and I just do it all in. And I'm like, no, I don't look around. It's not like a lot of analysis going on. It's like, oh yeah, that looks like I'm going to do that. And I go do it, you know? And so she's like, and that's why I think this is why God brings people together, because my wife's not like that at all, you know? So I get a little bit of the balance of like, you know, maybe you should think a little bit more. But I'm kind of like, hey, you know, no, I'm going to go be a real estate professional, real estate investor, and that's what I'm going to do. And you know, I think my dad's a lot like that. My mom's a lot like that. They do something and then they're not even looking around. And sometimes that's a problem because I won't call people for extended periods of time. You know, I'm bad. You know, so I just get like front side focused on one thing and I'm just doing it and I don't look around. So I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta like, you know, be a human too. I gotta be a dad and I gotta be a husband. And so
you know, one of the great things that you did where you helped me out a lot was I was in someone's house about 3 months ago. And as I was talking to them, they had a son who was probably about 10, maybe 11 years old. And as we were talking, you know, I asked the kid, you know, what does he want to do and growing up? And he was kind of like wearing like a little army outfit or something to do with military fatigues or something on. I forgot what it was. And his dad said, you know, tell Mr. Cook what you want to do. And he says, I want to be a Navy SEAL. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I said, for how long? He said, and his dad answered, you know, for the last 2 years, that's what he wants to go do. And I said, well, today's your lucky day. I said, I have a friend of mine named Paul who happened to work at Buds, and the little kid knew what Buds was. He had seen the 234 video, I'm sure. And so I called you, and the kid's on the phone. And I think he said to you, he said, yeah, I want to try to be a SEAL. Yeah. You remember what you told him?
Not exactly, but
you looked at him and said, no. When SEALs come to Buds, they're already SEALs.
Yeah.
Finish that thought up.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, Buds is not there to like build you up and turn you into somebody. It's there to find out who is the SEAL, you know? And when I was a Buds instructor, I used to always tell guys, I'm like, hey, we're not here to like build you into SEALs. We're here to find out who the SEALs are. Who are the SEALs? Because you're already that guy. It's too late. By the time you've showed up here, it's too late. Now you're under fire. Now you're on the X, you know? So I think that's more of what the thought is, you know, it's all about the mental and physical preparation up until that point, spiritual, all of that, all those things come into play. So don't wait till you're knocking on somebody's front door to go through it mentally of what you're going to do when they tell you to get off the front porch.
Yeah.
You've already dealt with that in your mind, so you know how to handle it.
And that's kind of when it goes back to what I talked about earlier, where it was when Kim looked and said, you've only done that deal structure maybe 2 or 3 times, 4 times.
Yeah.
But I'd done it up here over and over and over. So, right now, you heard Paul say earlier, I'm working on an options manual. And so I've been doing options since probably somewhere around 2000, something like that, maybe 2001. But not, I have not used an option in one of my deals probably in the last 12 or 13 years. So pretty much every deal I've done, there was option work involved somewhere. Maybe it was the right of first refusal. Maybe it was a buyback. There was something going on somewhere where an option was involved. And now I'm writing a manual on this thing, or writing a course on this thing. And let's say this.
Well, to me, dude, it's kind of like the option is a lot of people haven't used them before. So for me, I feel like as a normal, most real estate investors are providing solutions for homeowners, but then an option is kind of like this this gem that only select people have. So after all the negotiation, the back and forth, most people have to walk away from the table. But you're like, okay, this, and then that's just enough of the deal to give back to that person to get them to do the deal. Is it kind of like that, or
it's kind of like the best way to look at it is what happens when you're dealing with a homeowner and they want to keep their house, or you're dealing with a landlord who wants to keep his house.
Right.
And if all you know how to do is a 70 cent on the dollar offer, that means a purchase.
Yeah.
So you're going to walk away from a lot of people. You can't do the deal where an option, especially a pure option. So you have pure options, and that's an option without a lease.
Yeah.
A pure purchase option, but you can use those for people who want to keep their homes, and it's a special tool. But the point is I'm walking around, and I've been working on this course now for about a month, hard and heavy, and I'm walking around, and with every deal I'm thinking of, every deal I'm doing. A good example is there is a kid named Chad who's here in town, and so I'm in Adairsville, Georgia right now. Being quarantined in my motorhome in an RV park in Adairsville, Georgia. And Chad used to do work for us. He used to be our yard guy. He knew how to drive a tractor, mowed grass, landscape forest, worked on a number of our rental properties, cleaned out homes, stuff like that. Well, Chad inherited 2 houses here in Adairsville, side by side, for his mom and dad, or from his grandfather who passed away. And he worked at Barnsley Garden, which is a great big resort, and he's been laid off now for about 3 weeks. Now, for a lot of people, that would be bad because that means no paycheck coming in. But the good side is he lives with his grandmother. I'm taking care of her, so he doesn't have that expensive living. But the time down, these 2 houses were in pretty bad shape. So he's gotten one done. I've got to go by today. He said he would have it on the market yesterday, ready to rent. But the thing is, he's used all his money. But he has time now to get that work done on the houses instead of after work or before work. And he's trying to get them done to get these things rented so he has the paycheck coming in. So he understands financial freedom because he was around us for 5 or 6 years. So I was walking by. I was just on my morning walk, and there he is. And hey, Chad, and how you doing? And we talked. And so I immediately went, because he has both properties he wants to keep. He has one property done and paid for, getting ready to go on the market. The other house needs maybe about $10,000 or $15,000 in rehab before he can rent it. But he can't get a loan because he's been laid off.
Yeah. And
he doesn't want to turn to family because he doesn't want that obligation. And so immediately I went to him and said, well, I've got a great way. Because he said, how can I do this without borrowing the money? He said, would you loan me the money? I said, no, I won't loan you the money, but I will buy an option on both of those properties where you're going to split. I get part of the upside. I get part of the, one day you may sell those homes. And if you do, I'm going to get part of the upside, but I'll give you the $15,000. So that's not a note. He's not making payments. He didn't increase his debt load. He's just going to give me an option that I'm going to secure the properties. And this is a great thing for him because it allows him to keep his cash flow. He gets the cash he needs right now, right away. He can finish the rehab on that second home. And when he's done, when he goes back to work, All of a sudden now he has 2 rental houses supplementing his income, and he's on his way to financial freedom.
Yeah.
And we did that in the driveway, and it took 8 minutes.
Right. What an
But I'd already done that deal a bunch of times using options in my head, just thinking. So always have it in your head. Always be thinking, how would I structure this deal? How would I structure that deal?
Yeah.
Well, Paul, buddy, we've gone on for a while, but I think we have a lot out of this get together.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Bill. I appreciate it.
Final words to someone who's thinking about quitting.
Final words, man. Throw me on the table. Throw me in the limelight like that. Final words. Somebody who's thinking about quitting. I mean, I don't know. Don't think about it. Don't ignore that thought. It doesn't. You are not your thoughts. Okay. So, I think that's the most important thing, and I think that's what successful people do. They ignore anything that is counter to what brings you closer to success. And you cannot identify with every single thought that enters your mind. You have to completely ignore those things. So.
Senior Chief, thank you very much for your service.
Thanks, Bill. Talk soon.
Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.